This paper is actually, I was supposed to, the brief given to me was ideological synthesis, drawing from tradition of Indian thought, different traditions of Indian thought, contemporary Indian thought or modern Indian thought. And what I do in the paper, partly, is to take the different thinkers that I'm structure the paper around two key thematics. One is the debate around technology and modernity and so on between Gandhi, Tagore, Ambedkar, and it's not a debate.
So, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on what are then the challenges for those of us who have pinned our hopes on that post-national world. Also, a little bit more about why, what you, the Hind Swaraj mein.
Hindustan, Bharat ki bajay Hindustan.
I think that there is a radical aspect in Ambedkar also. I mean, that was not mentioned. Radical in terms of democracy. I'm talking about in terms of democracy, not only social. But he is not unconditionally for equality, minusing individual freedom. That is a peculiarity of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And I think that is not less than Amendment. No, it is particularly more stressing more about on the individual freedom. Not at all compromising individual freedom and still have equality. That is Ambedkar's position. So I think that should be taken into account while combining radical and social together. And you can whether combine the last paragraph of Communist Manifesto, where Marx says that unlimited development of each individual is condition for development of all. So there is a radical democracy here also. So that is one thing. I don't know what you mentioned about Gandhi. There is Hindustani. As I know about north of India, Muslims never call themselves Bharatiya. They call themselves Hindustani. And Hindustani was the name of the language once upon, which is called now as Urdu. So this is also a cultural ethos of what we call as Bharatvash. So I'm not saying that Mahatma Gandhi said Hind in those terms. So Mahatma Gandhi's conception may be very different. But if you are banking on the word Hind, so, which has a different kind of history, which has got nothing to do with Hindu religion or anything, and still in many people's ethos it is not. So that is a problem there. That is the second thing. And lastly, I don't know, you didn't say much about Tagore.
I left out that whole part. I didn't have the time to. I just focused on one part.
Say something.
26 November 49 is the context I expected. Aditya, he has been generally very bold to be transcended for a futuristic ideological framework. You are suggesting it's high time we have the intellectual courage to say social democracy and radical democracy is unfeasible project because it allows, howsoever radical it might be, it allows only 4 entities: state, market, consumer and voter. The only word in today's vocabulary I can imagine is Swaraj, because it starts from the individual self to the planetary self, including all forms of life and non-life, if you are able to identify with the Brahman. So this concentric circle, which if you imagine an ocean oceanic circle where you throw a stone. They are very beautiful concentric circles supporting each other, mutually connected and not competing with each other. That is the future form of society, and democracy does not allow that. That's the first point. So you have to give up this word which has been contaminated by all kinds of pollutions. That's the first part. The second observation I have is, if you insist that new words and vocabulary come through a movement and there is no movement, then I would say use comprehensive democracy at least, and levels of democracy from village to the planet in the world social order. You have a club of 5 people and a toy called UN of American international policy, and there's no democracy and we don't talk about it. There's an instrument called NATO, and German Greens, they said no, don't pass a resolution against NATO.
मेरा 5 मिनट में खाली पड़ा।
Okay, just the second comment I want to say it in 2 lines. That political, social, cultural, gender, spiritual dimensions also have a democratic, if democracy means participation, dimensions to it. So geographically and dimension wise, the whole life has to be covered in the democracy concept. It has to be expanded. Only then new imagination can be sort of achieved.
Today has been a day of dismantling caste, minority status, and now you want to dismantle parliamentary democracy. So the question was that, so if that happens, what is it that keeps the nation together? And is there a space you see for the state? Because we cannot wish away the state. So where does that?
I was tempted to actually go into the origins of the word democracy and sustainability and so on. Maybe tomorrow I'll just mention this, because I think we need to rescue these words from the way they've been hijacked. But yeah, I think just wanting to bring in a little bit of the ecological in all of this, and maybe if you brought Tagore, you didn't have time, maybe that would have happened on parts of Gandhi. I don't know if Ambedkar said anything about ecology at all. But if one, in a radical social democracy, or what Seaman have used, radical ecological democracy format, would you imagine that the boundaries, political boundaries also have to then be reimagined? So, again, maybe anti-national, post-national, I don't know what I want to call it, but, and also maybe briefly responding to what Bilon just said. So maybe then we actually even start reimagining what the nation is. What our political identities are based on ecological contiguities, ecological linkages, and so on. And of course cultural, or biocultural as the term might be. So is that something that kind of, does it emanate from any of these thinkers in some way? And if so, what would be your thoughts on this?
I'm a little concerned about how exactly you have liberated Ambedkar and Gandhi from their context. Because the discussion still seems to be rooted within the context that they came from. It doesn't have much to say about today's context. The second point is, following Iqbal, if we say that every present generates its own future, then what is the current state? I mean, in today's present, what is the future that is emerging? Is it going to emerge out of dissecting Gandhi, Ambedkar, Tagore, etc.? Or will it come from dissecting the present and what various philosophers, including Vijay, have to say about the present? So how do we reconcile these two?
And the last, I think I may as well take some. Okay. No, because there's a plate full of questions here. Now, okay, let me take the parliamentary democracy Swaraj question first, because that's come up both in Asim's and Vijay's thing, but also in question. First, Vijay, let me get this out of the way. I think the idea of Swaraj, the way you have elaborated, is delightfully vague, and it's a statement of good intentions, but doesn't give us anything more than that. Whereas what I'm actually trying to articulate through M.N. Roy and Ambedkar, of course, even the paper has limitations of space because I couldn't actually go into the whole thing, but it is based on a certain concrete imagination of the institutional forms of village republics, not in the sense in which they actually exist, but in Roy's radical democracy, it is a local republic. It's not village, but which could be whatever, local village, urban, whatever, and so on. But combined with the Ambedkarite idea of where you have the social and moral conscience question, which in Roy's own understanding is predicated on the idea of a new Indian Renaissance. This is the later Roy, which basically who basically comes to believe that there cannot be any political or social transformation without a cultural or intellectual transformation. So there, I think there is a lot in common there. So what those local republics and their forms will be, the question of partyless democracy and so on, all these things have some kind of an institutional imagination there, which links, in my view, to Asim and Ilango's presentation in the earlier thing, because that can only come along with an imagination of a localization in the economic life. You cannot have a centralized economic corporate directed form with radical social democracy. So in that sense, the question of ecology and so on are quite central to how you imagine this. So that's one. The question of the post-national, actually, I have to also use, given the 10-12 minutes at my disposal, some things in shorthand. But some years ago, some of us from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka were actually engaged in a long conversation on the question of the post-national. Idea being not simply that post-national, not simply another name for the globe. The post-national here is a reference to the fact that the historically the emancipatory potential that was once thought to be part of the nationalist imagination, question of citizenship, rights, and so on and so forth, that has been exhausted. That today, nationalist form is a purely oppressive form which embodies the dominant culture, and whatever challenges you see to it are also articulated only in nationalist terms. So, if Jammu and Kashmir wants Azadi, that will also be another nation state. If the Northeast, already you start throwing out the Biharis and so on and so forth, it's actually a kind of, the history of the nation form and nationalism is a history of ethnic cleansing also in a manner. So the post-national here refers to, in the contribution that I made in that, actually I counterposed this idea of nation to another kind of belonging which is expressed, for example, in our everyday language even today, Des or Watan or whatever, which is actually not the nation. It is where you live, and which never demands that you express your loyalty every day, every hour. So like Ernest Renan said, it's a daily plebiscite. The nation's existence is a daily plebiscite. That's not how Des or Watan is conceived, or the relationship to a Des or Watan is conceived. So post-national in that sense is a non-state idea. And so the rise of all these bizarre identities and so on, I actually see only as a reflection of, or as a mirror image of the state and the nation form, the kind you are referring to. So that's it. And now one, Bharat's question, actually I don't disagree with whatever you've said. I think that That's pretty much the case, except that Ambedkar calls his form social democracy and Roy calls it radical democracy. I am using their nomenclature. But which is not to say that social is not radical and radical is not social, and that's not the intention there. The Hind question I disagree. Because Gandhi's position on this, right up to the 1940s, and first of all, Hindustani was not the name of Urdu. Hindustani was the, initially, Hindi, Urdu, Rekhta, all these were the name of a common Khadiboli language which emerged. And it is only in the 18th, 19th century that the division starts taking. 19th century it becomes, in fact, late 19th century it starts becoming institutionalized into, so people who later became people like Artendu, who later became the flag bearers of Hindi, when he first translated Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, he translated it as Venice ka Saudagar. It wasn't the later Sanskritized translation. So, which is, I'm forgetting which so, but then, as the battle sort of becomes connected with Pratap Narayan Mishra's Hindu-Hindustan equation coming to the fore as the defining feature of nationalism, the division between Hindi and Urdu becomes coterminous with the division between the Hindus and Muslims. And that is the point at which Hindustani emerges as the language or as the name for partly an imagined language, but it's not entirely imagined, because that mixed language which I use, and I do all my writing in Hindustani actually, was considerable mix of Khadiboli Hindi, Urdu, with a lot of Sanskrit words, vocabulary also. When that division actually becomes crystallized and becomes contentious, Gandhi throws his lot against the Hindi Sahitya Sammelan. He sets up the Hindustani Sahitya Sammelan. So Gandhi, throughout, from the time of Hind Swaraj till independence, was a champion of Hindustani, which, in my understanding, was partly an actually existing language, but partly an imagination of the future, partly an imagination of what that new language should be, and what that new nation should be. So in that sense, his calling it Hind Swaraj is not without, it's not coming from nowhere. I think there is something which is there from the beginning. Okay, I'll come to the state and this other thing in a minute, but yeah. But just to come to Dunu's question first. See, when I say I want to liberate them from their historical context, I don't want to liberate them from their texts. But I mean, then I can construct any idea of Ambedkar or Gandhi. That's not what I'm intending. What I'm intending to do is that each time I say, it's like if each time you were to quote Aristotle, somebody would say, but he was a slave owner, or he lived in a slave owning society. Therefore, he was erring. Now, what I'm saying is that actually does not allow us to extricate from these texts what is of value. Right? Every time you are actually forced to sociologize, historicize, and so on and so forth, without being able to grasp what is of value. And there, I think, it is possible, if you extricate it from there, these texts can be made to speak to each other. So, to that extent. For the question of the state, well, I think my general instinct is pretty anarchist on this. I mean, I don't think, yes, the state exists and I cannot wish it away, and you may need sometimes to play one off against the other. So sometimes you need the market to play against the state, sometimes you need the state to play against the market, because actually the history of state without the market is as sad a history as the history of, but there is no history of market without the state. There is actually, market has always operated with the hidden hand of the state. So it is not the market which is the hidden hand, it is the state. Yes, the invisible hand is the state. So in that sense,
context की बात है.
हमारे यहाँ पर
modern context की बात
Not
है.
mean bazaar.
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. We are talking of the, yeah,
Post.
political economy, yes. So that's my position in short. And yes, something gone missing. Of course, Tagore is discussed in the technology section. I would have liked to discuss that a bit more, but there are also limitations of like 8,000 words and so on, and it's already a bit.
Yes.
It has become longer. Yours was 5,000 words. It already became almost.
Yeah, so 8,000 words. Yeah, so thanks, Aditya. It was very nice.